Fellow Ghanaians, good evening, and thank you very much for joining us on Upfront on the Joy News channel. It's a Thursday, the 12th day of August 2021. Lots of issues happening in the country, lots of you still talking about Health Minister Kweku Agyeman-Manu, but of course, today we're hearing that the Sheikh Al Maktoum has made payments to the country. And you've heard Deputy Majority Leader in Parliament, that's Alexander Apanyomaking, talking about the fact that, look, that settles the issue because finally Parliament talked about taking steps to retrieve those funds that were paid to Sheikh Al Maktoum. That has been done, and for him, that brings finality to the matter. But there's still some of you who say, no, it can't bring finality to the matter because you believe that the Health Minister, Kweku Agyeman-Manu, violated the Public Procurement Act. Well, he's actually asked for ratification, so we're waiting, but he didn't have cabinet approval. He also didn't have parliamentary approval for an international transaction. And you believe he cannot be excused for that. Well, it's just a second weekend. We're still looking at what would happen. You've called on the president to have him fired if he refuses to resign. Let's see if the president will do that. But today our focus is on the NDC's proposed electoral reforms. Now, the NDC is talking about some 30 reforms which they believe would help Ghana's democracy. Amongst these reforms is the fact that the chairperson of the Electoral Commission should be vetted by Parliament. It has to be approved. So the NDC says, let us not just stay with a situation where currently you have a chairperson of the Electoral Commission appointed by the president, sworn in by the president, and that's the end of it. Now, the interesting thing about this is that, as part of the Constitutional Review Commission's report, it was something they recommended, captured in the white paper, that, for instance, the chairperson of the Electoral Commission, the Commission of Human Rights and Administrative Justice should all be vetted by Parliament. So let's see how that is going to go. They're also talking about the fact that the Electoral Commission should be split into two separate bodies, namely an Office for Regulation of Political Parties, an Electoral Commission by amending the Political Parties Act. They want Ipac to be backed by a legislation through an amendment to the EC Act, which would spell out its composition and functions. They're also talking about the national, broadcaster being made to comply with the Supreme Court decision for it to provide equal access to all political parties. 30 of these reforms, but this evening we're going to be focusing on about 7 of these reforms, for instance, and we're going to be focusing on, the statement of poll and declaration of resource forms, the NDC says, should be redesigned and simplified. Now, what you and I have come to know as the pink sheet, some say a bit cumbersome. Some say it makes it very difficult for people to understand what's really happening, and that's why sometimes you do have mistakes, political party agents getting confused in all of these. The question we're asking this evening is, well, at this stage of the country's democracy, one, do we need to change how Electoral Commission chairpersons are appointed? Do we need to change it? Do we also need legal backing for the Inter-Party Advisory Committee? One would say, haven't they done well so far? Do we need to change their role as it is currently? This is Upfront on the Joy News channel. My name is Winston Amma. When I return after these messages, I'll be introducing my guest for this evening, and then we zoom straight into the conversation. But you can also join us, particularly on Twitter, as you tweet at Joy News on TV. We'll find it, we'll share it with the rest of the world. You can also join us on Facebook Live, that's Joy News, and then share your thoughts there. I certainly would ask all the questions that you want asked on your behalf. We'll be right back. All right, so welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us here on Upfront on the Joy News channel. And tonight we're joined by a former UN senior governance advisor. Many of you would know him. He's been with CDD, Professor Bafo Agyeman-Manu, to help us understand all of these. We're also expecting to be joined later on by Dr. Eric Odrosai, who's a governance expert. Professor Bafo Agyeman-Manu, good evening, and thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure to be with you, Winston.
Great. So let's start off. We know that the NDC's, presented some 30 electoral reforms. First, what do you make of the decision by the largest opposition party, take it upon itself to start the conversation for electoral reforms in this country?
Thanks. First of all, I am particularly excited that the NDC has decided to introduce a very important matter for public discussions, a reform of the electoral laws. I'm excited because this will be placed in the context of a larger question, which is the need for reforming the constitution that we have had since 1992. Certainly, this constitution has helped us, no doubt, because for almost 30 years, we have succeeded with electoral democracy. We have changed governments peacefully and all within the 30 years. So the constitution has said that, but I think it's about time. So for the NDC to pick up this and make such an elaborate proposals, I think is good. And more importantly, the proposals appear to me to be very, very forward-looking. So it deserves, the proposals deserve hearing. Now, you asked about the specific question of one proposal relating to the, if you can remind me, which specific aspect did you throw your question at?
Well, I mean, first, I asked a general question, what you made of a political party, the largest opposition party, coming forward with these reforms. And you've said, this is forward-looking, and you think that it talks about all of this. So let's move into the specifics now. Let's look at, the proposals that have been, 30 of them. Yes. But I will start off with one that says there should be parliamentary vetting of the Electoral Commission chairperson. Now, what's wrong with the current situation, and why would we need parliamentary vetting of the chairperson of the Electoral Commission?
I think the recent difficulty we've had with our elections, the past 2 or so elections, really makes this particular point relevant. We all know the circumstances under which the previous Electoral Commission chairperson, Ms. Charlotte Osei, was displaced. And we also know the reactions of the opposition party that really continued into the last election, that I believe may have contributed to the so much controversy over the outcome of that election. In other words, the mode of appointment of the Electoral Commission has been a contentious issue. Even under Dr. Afarijan, the very famous Afarijan that we all liked, we all admired, even under him, there were cases of a serious tension over certain decisions that he made. And every now and then, the issue of the appointment of the Electoral Commission came to the fore. So this is not a new one. Truly, if you look at the nature of our politics, the extreme partisanship that all the political parties, especially the 2 parties, exhibit, that in itself will instruct us that we better find a way to ensure that the selection and appointment of electoral commissioners are done in such a way that there will be no contention, there will be no political coloration. You see, I think all presidents do these things in good faith. Nonetheless, because of the fact that these decisions, or the decision to select an electoral commissioner, is the sole prerogative of the president, simply with the approval of, the Council of State, that in itself raises all kinds of suspicions, even if the president has made the appointment in good faith and based on the qualifications of the person. So I think as we move forward, there's nothing wrong reviewing these things. No, we say that democracy is not an event, it's a process. Very true. But the greater truth is that democracy is an unending journey. I recall a book written years ago by a gentleman called John Donne, and he titled his book, Democracy, the Unending Journey. Simply put, there is no arrival point for democracy. And all democracies in the world periodically will have to take a look and review the processes that they have created to achieve the democratic ends. So in the same way, I think after almost 30 years of working with this last constitution, which gave us the democratic framework, I think it's time. And if the opposition, and by the way, this is not the first time a party has made proposals. We must also remember that the NPP in opposition made some very important proposals during the Afarijan era that helped the country in refining and fine-tuning our electoral processes.
Okay.
The introduction of transparent ballot boxes, picture IDs, and all that were under the instigation of the opposition than the NPP. So that's why I told you I'm also delighted that in opposition, the NDC has also seen the need to make proposals that will help to refine our democratic electoral processes.
Okay. Now,
so I think that is a very good move.
Now you've talked. So let's look at the vetting of chairpersons of the Electoral Commission. You've talked about the appointment of Charlotte Osei and the subsequent removal, issues of suspicion. How does the vetting of the chairperson of the Electoral Commission deal with issues of suspicion? After all, the party with the majority in Parliament would see that appointee through.
You're very right, Winston, very right on that point. In fact, I'm not too enthused about parliamentary review. It may subject the issue to political football, as we see in most cases. You see, there are many different ways of selecting chairs of political parties, of electoral commissions. If you go to countries like Bangladesh and elsewhere, you find that it's not the president who appoints. They have a neutral entity that does that. You can put some neutral institutions together for them to advertise and select a person. And once the person is selected, maybe for our purposes, they select 2 or 3 individuals, give it to the president to select one before even it goes to Parliament. So before the person goes to Parliament, assuming that we still need parliamentary approval, the person will be known, the background and everything. And I'm sure if it goes to Parliament in that kind of context, there wouldn't be any serious partisanship. So the point is that the NDC is pointing to one possible approach to solving the problem of the selection or appointment of electoral commissioners. Okay. That's one. But there are many others that people can bring to the table for discussion.
I'll get back to you shortly. Let me also say that we're joined by Dr. Eric Odrosai. Unfortunately, he's unable to join us via Zoom, so he joins us on the phone. Dr. Odrosai, good evening. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening.
Great. Let me get your views on this. So the NDC has made 30 proposals, but the first one is parliamentary approval for the chairperson of the Electoral Commission. How does this solve or deepen our country's democracy? Do we need to take the chairperson of the Electoral Commission through vetting?
Well, if you ask me, I'll say yes and no.
Okay. Why yes and why no?
Yes, because if that is what will satisfy all actors in the electoral process, then so be it. And no, because with where we have reached and the way our democracy is going, we would always have a majority and a minority. So that if we can go through a vetting process and the majority can have their way, the minority can have their say, and we'll come back to the same point. My view of the position of the Electoral Commission is that we should make it a public office. We should advertise. We should get the best person to occupy the position through a competitive process. If the opposition NDC wants it to be that transparent and that independent, the current parliamentary processes will really not give us the independence they expect. Because whether we like it or not, there's a majority and a minority. And even with the current arrangement, we have the president appointing the person. But suffice it to say that anybody appointed to that position is expected to be independent, not only in deed, but in actions as well. So I find it strange to believe anybody who says that the Electoral Commission is not independent. If we really want an independent person in the eyes of the law, in the eyes of all actors, then we should make it a public office.
Now, if we make it a public office, Dr. Eric Odrosai, what becomes the mode of appointment? Do we detach the president totally from it? Which body then appoints the chairperson of the Electoral Commission?
No, then what it means is that if the position becomes vacant, they advertise the position.
And who makes the appointment? Who says you qualify to be chairperson of the Electoral Commission?
No, the law must prescribe the position, except that
what do you propose be done? What do you propose be captured in the law?
I propose that they capture it, one, as a public office. Two, Public Services Commission must be responsible for filling the position. Three, the position must be filled using a competitive process.
And after that, it goes for parliamentary approval, or we should take Parliament out of it?
No, once it is a public service position, you don't go through a parliamentary approval. Because I am making that proposal because in Parliament, we have a majority and a minority. Depending on which party is in power, which obviously would be the majority, in case our election is going to go the way it has gone in the past. Then the majority would have their way. Then the same president who would nominate the person, because he has majority in Parliament, the person can go through parliamentary vetting, and the person will come back as an EC chair. So that really will not solve the problem or the lacuna maybe the NDC's proposal seeks to cure. But what I think we can do, if they think that the president appointing an EC chair is a challenge, then we should make it a public office and give the power to Public Services Commission and make the position open to all to compete. And they should go through it. They should appoint the president through a competitive interview.
Well, we have seen we've seen presidents, in consultation with the Council of State appointing, chief justices, and justices of the Supreme Court. They go through vetting, and in many of the instances, from all the vettings I have watched, you see these persons going in there, asked questions by members of Parliament, and then by consensus, they approved. So why can't we do same for the chairperson of the Electoral Commission? Go to Parliament, and we have seen that when it comes to Parliament's Appointments Committee, majority of the time, they approve these nominees through consensus. Wouldn't that further deepen our democracy? Because after all, both parties, if you have any concerns, you have the person addressing those concerns, answering the questions, and so you then are able to decide whether I support this person or not.
We have seen in this country where the appointment committee may have recommended the approval of a candidate that appears before them, but not all the members were in favor of that person's candidature. So what I think we should do as a country is, if we think that the president appointing an electoral commissioner or chairperson is a problem, we should make it a public office. Until we do that, we will come back to challenge the process any day, any time there's an election. And I think that is really not fair. But we should also give the chairpersons some credit. We've had a number of chairpersons in the past. They have been appointed by sitting presidents, and they've been so professional that in certain cases, the president that appoints them normally loses the election, and other people come in. We've seen it under Ferijan, and then we also saw it under Charlotte Osei. So I think that we shouldn't do the thing or speak as if when people are appointed by the president, they go in to cook the election for a sitting president. I've never seen it happening. What I see happening is that those who are appointed are normally professional, except that there's always the perception that because the sitting president appointed them, there's a likelihood that the person would work in favor of the sitting president. But if anybody understands the way our elections work in this country, it will be extremely difficult for a chairperson of an electoral commission sitting in Accra to manipulate the election for a sitting president.
Let me get Professor Abafo Agyemandua's take on this. So, Prof, Dr. Eric Odrosai is proposing that it becomes a public office. And so the Public Services Commission then is mandated to make it a competitive one, advertise it, and then interviews are conducted. And the best person suitable for the job is giving the job. Something you agree?
Yeah, first of all, let me say hello to Eric. Great friend, having seen him for a while. Yes, I think there's merit in what Eric is saying. But my reservation is that if you reduce it completely to public service kind of appointment, which can work. It may not cure the disease that we are seeking to cure. Unless, of course, the other proposals by the NDC is a long list. If you take all of that into account, then that will make sense to me. For instance, the NDC is proposing additional transparency systems in the process, where he says, for instance, the presidential ballots in the constituencies should be announced. We don't have to wait for everything to come to the so-called strong room to announce. That's a very interesting proposal. And many others that I have made. If those systems are put in place, right, then he's right that no matter who is the electoral chairperson, you cannot manipulate as even it is today. And President used to tell all of us that, and in fact, the first Supreme Court case, 2012, they also told us that elections are won at the polling stations. And it's very true because of the system we have created. Nonetheless, these perennial suspicions, as Eric rightly pointed out, where is it coming from? So perhaps if we succeed in adding those transparency processes that have been proposed and others that can be suggested by other people, then we are strengthening the system. So if it's possible for us to strengthen the electoral process in such a way that the system becomes bulletproof, so that irrespective of who is the chairperson or the regional director or wherever, you can't touch it, then I think we're on the same plane on this call.
Great. Well, so, I mean, in effect, you're looking at different ways of making sure that the chairperson of the Electoral Commission is insulated from the suspicion by political parties. But let's look at one other point. And I start off with you, Dr. Eric Odrosai, because NDC is also proposing that Ipac should be backed by legislation through an amendment to the EC Act, which would spell its composition and function. Yes, Ipac has been functioning for a very long time now, but we all do know that as an advisory body, it has no legal backing. I mean, it's not in the Electoral Commission Act. So it's more like the Electoral Commission saying, oh, we want to be engaging political parties as an inter-party advisory committee. Is this the way to go?
Well, it will depend on the mandate or the terms of reference given to Ipac. To start with, it is just a committee. Now, the Electoral Commission is expected to operate as an independent institution without interference. So if making Ipac, legislation for Ipac to be institutionalized, and it will not affect the independent powers and functioning of the Electoral Commission, then I am all for it. But if you legislate and then Ipac becomes an institution that would interfere or whose advice the Electoral Commission will be bound by, then that would undermine the letter and spirit of the Constitution.
How would it undermine the letter and spirit of the Constitution?
You know, the Electoral Commission is expected to be an independent institution or an arbiter in an electoral process. And Ipac is an association or a committee of the actors in the main election. So that if you are a referee and you have Ghana Football Association or Association of League Players, and they would have to advise you and then impose their advice on you, then when lies you are independent, you are supposed to be a regulator. You know, so they can advise. It is up to the Electoral Commission to take the advice or not on the basis of how it exercises the constitutional powers given to it under the Constitution. So I think we should leave it as it is and then advise them to allow them to continue to play the advisory role. It is like saying that the Council of State should be made an institution whose advice to bind the president. No. So I think that we should leave it as it is, unless the legislation for the Ipac would make Ipac still an advisory body that will not undermine the independent powers of the Electoral Commission. If that is the case, I am all for it. Because the Ipac is just a forum for the political parties to express their views, make inputs into the Electoral Commission's work. The Electoral Commission can decide to accept it or not, because if the elections fail, it is nobody will blame the political party. They will blame the Electoral Commission because they have the constitutional mandate to organize free, fair, and credible elections. So I think we should leave it as it is, except that we should find a way of consciously, the Electoral Commission consciously consulting and then bringing on board the ideas of the Ipac, and then also meeting with them frequently. That I would recommend. But institutionalizing Ipac would undermine the independent powers of the Electoral Commission. That will even create problems, more credibility problems for the elections that the EC normally conducts.
How would institutionalizing Ipac create credibility problems for the elections? How?
Once you institutionalize the Ipac, what you have done is that it becomes mandatory for the Electoral Commission to first consult Ipac on all issues, every step they take. Whereas the Constitution gives them the independent powers to perform their functions under a constitutional instrument. Two, once you institutionalize Ipac, what it then means is that you are indirectly preventing the Electoral Commission to act as it's expected to act. And it is also going to create another bureaucracy that should be budgeted for as far as elections in this country is concerned. So I think that we should leave it as it is. The Electoral Commission has the right to consult them, not even as Ipac, but as individual political parties, and it helps. And you realize that when they go for Ipac meetings, the bigger political parties end up swallowing the smaller political parties. So once you institutionalize it too, it's going to create another bureaucracy. So my view is that we should leave it as it is, but rather encourage the Electoral Commission to consult Ipac on a more regular basis. And the consultation must be documented. Decisions must be made public. The ones EC will take, they should inform the public. The ones they will not take, they should inform the public and move on. It shouldn't be as if Ipac has been institutionalized. So whatever they advise, the EC must take it. And when it happens like that, in most cases, it is the opposition that will come up with recommendations. If you fail to take it, they will tell you that the outcome of the election will be questioned. And that will not augur well for us.
Let me get to you, Professor Bafo Ajimendria. So the NDC says, let's give some legal backing to Ipac. And that legislation will determine its composition and functions. You agree?
It's a very interesting point. And I like the argument Eric has just made. Interestingly, this was one of the sore points during the leadership of Dr. Farija. These matters were raised, whether Ipac should be institutionalized. And he kept saying, no, this is an independent body. I don't want any interference. And he was right on the mark. But you know what? If you want to institutionalize it, it means that we have to revise the operational code of Ipac. Maybe what it is used to doing cannot be part of that new code, because it's true that the independence of the Electoral Commission should always be protected, which means that if we were to institutionalize the Ipac, Ipac cannot take decisions contrary to the law. The laws regulating elections and all. So it's not an idea of institutionalizing Ipac for Ipac to dictate to the Electoral Commission. In fact, the Electoral Commission itself will be part of the Ipac, you see. So I think that the rationale behind this whole notion as proposed by the NDC, which I tend to sympathize with, is that oftentimes political parties make some very interesting suggestions. The absence of reasons, at times explained, many other times not explained, the Electoral Commission refuses to take it. And that tends to irritate the political parties. And if you consider democracy basically as an inclusive process, then I don't see why we should be afraid that the political parties, the Ipac, once institutionalized and given its framework in supporting the electoral process and the commission, I don't see why that should be a threat to the independence of the EC, Electoral Commission, all depending on how we structure the Ipac and how we create a framework for its functioning. So if we can do that successfully, then I think this fear that the independence of the Electoral Commission will be attacked will not be there. Also, I think it's important we find some room for the political parties to become direct participants of the. Of course, I know they participate; they are the voting centers and all. But when it comes to making critical decisions for strengthening the electoral process, those issues that come to the Ipac. By the way, I don't think any political party will have an agenda. I'm going to demolish or undermine the Electoral Commission. That cannot be allowed. That's why I'm saying it depends on the framework that we create for the Ipac to function. If we successfully do that and we place limitations and give it a defined role, then it will enhance the what we call the trust level that the political parties have, because oftentimes it is certain decisions that may not even be legal but regulatory that the Electoral Commission takes that tends to irritate the political parties and cause all kinds of noises that we don't want. So I'm not too on this particular matter. I deviate a bit from my good friend Eric, because I think we should not be afraid to take steps that hopefully can broaden the democratic space.
So you support, I mean, giving a legal backing to Ipac, and you think that that amendment will be necessary and it will determine its composition and function. You support the NDC on this?
I'm supporting it on the basis that we define very well the role of Ipac.
Exactly.
Because, as I said, I agree with Eric, nothing should be done to undermine the independence of the Electoral Commission. That's the first level. Once we agree on that, then whatever that we do with Ipac will be done in such a way that it will not undermine the Electoral Commission's independence.
Right, so we're having a conversation about, the proposed electoral reforms by the NDC, 30 of them, but we'll focus on about 11 of them, about 7 of them, I beg your pardon, here on Upfront on the Joy News Channel. And this evening we're joined by Dr. Eric Udrosai, who is a governance expert. He's also the Director General of the Institute of the Internal Audit Agency. And Professor Bafo Ajimandua is a former UN Senior Governance Advisor. So let's look at another point. And let me start this with you, Dr. Eric Udrosai. In the 2020 elections, we had the establishment of regional coalition centers. Now, previously, we had a situation where right after elections, particularly the presidential elections, the results were transmitted to Accra, collated, and declared. Now, there was a regional coalition center, and so in Accra, we had, the collation of regional summaries. The NDC is saying these coalition centers should be abolished. You agree?
Well, I have not read the justification they gave, but I think that the Electoral Commission are masters of their own rule. So they may have to go back to discuss it with the actors in the election. Maybe the justification and the way the regional coalition centers have functioned under the 2020 elections may have created one problem or the other. But I want to believe that the Electoral Commission introduced it as an interface and then an intermediary collation point to facilitate effective declaration of results. If for one reason or the other it is not serving the intended purpose, they have every right to step back and then review it. So that is a proposal that can be considered by the Electoral Commission. But that should also be juxtaposed against the fair, free, and then transparent election concept. Because in the previous elections we've seen that it took a number of days before results were declared. In the 2020 elections, the Electoral Commission indicated that for the purpose of declaring the election results on time or in a record time, and then also ensuring that they will be able to quality assure the process, they want to introduce the regional coalition centers, and they did that through a constitutional.
Well, but unfortunately, they could not declare the results. I mean, the Director of Electoral Services, the Electoral Commission, Dr. Sribokwa, who had indicated that they had plans to declare the results in 24 hours. That did not happen. Elections held on Monday. A declaration was on Wednesday. That was about 48 hours after the closure of polls. So that did not really happen. And we've seen it. I mean, it's been like a similar situation in all elections after About 48 hours, we had the declaration. So really, what would you say was the advantage of the regional coalition centers?
No, the advantage of the regional coalition center was to give meaning to our decentralization. And with my background as a local government person, the best way of collating any results is use a bottom-up approach. You get the constituency or the district level electoral results. You collate them into a regional result. You aggregate the results from all the regions to get the national result. And it becomes easier if you want to verify and validate. So that bottom-up approach reduces the inaccuracies and the errors that are likely to be committed in the collation process. However, this was introduced by a CI, and in every election, they come out with a new CI to govern it. So they can step back, review how the regional collation centers have worked. If they think it has not served the intended purposes, they can agree as a commission to abolish it. But I would strongly recommend that if there are any challenges, they should resolve the challenges. And I would encourage them to continue to use the decentralized bottom-up approach to collating election results, because it is more easier to verify such results than results that are not collated through a regional collation center.
Professor Bafo-Agyeman-Duah, I mean, all this while we've been told, okay, so the Electoral Commission told us we intend to declare results in record time. So we want to do this. Now, that did not happen. Voting ended on Monday, 5 p.m. Declaration around 6, 7 p.m. on Wednesday, 48 hours. So really, the regional coalition centers, which were to facilitate the declaration of results, did not achieve that particular target. What business do we have keeping it?
You see, they couldn't achieve the target because of the centralization of the results with the presidential votes. And here I agree with Eric that it's important we do the bottom-up approach as a way of helping to deepen our decentralization. Perfect point. But you see, I think the value that the proposal by the NDC is bringing here is not just abolishing it, but making sure that the constituency results of the presidency is announced at the coalition center. Right now, as we have it, the reason why they could not meet their own target of announcing it is because they were waiting for all the results to come in from the constituencies before determining the presidential election. You see, if they had a system where at every coalition center in the regions is announced which presidential candidate got it, all their numbers, that's just for the region. It's similar to what goes on in the United States. Results are announced on state-to-state basis. You don't wait for all the states, 50 states, to bring their results before you know who won the presidency. So you see, if you do that, if you announce it at the constituency level, or the regional level, then you are also negating any possibility of these suspicions about figures changing in the course of transmission. So I don't see anything wrong at all. In fact, I'll be delighted if it's accepted that at every coalition center, the 16 centers, we announce the presidential results there before it gets to the Electoral Commission, who will then have all the 16 or so results, tallying them up and announcing. You see, all this for me will be a measure to again do away with needless suspicions and tension.
Yeah, but Prof, we've seen the situation where, at the constituency coalition centers, the results are announced, the presidential and the parliamentary. At the regional coalition center, which is for only presidential elections, agents are there, the coalition is done, and then they know which party had what at the regional coalition centers. Well, but I mean, at that particular area, you know what your party had because the parties have agents there. Closely linked to that, and let me just chip this in, is the fact that the NDC is calling for a public broadcast of the presidential vote collation process at the EC head office, and as and when the collated results are received.
Correct.
What's your take on that?
I guess that's exactly where I'm hitting at, even though I started at the collation center. You see, when the collation results come to the so-called strong room, it's kept. No announcement is made until all of them arrive before they tally up. So the idea of announcing each collation result, again, brings transparency to the process. I believe that all the Electoral Commission chairpersons of the commissions we have had, they are professional. They do their work diligently, from Afarijan to Jane Manson. Okay? The problem has been the political parties and the suspicions that they hold, baseless or based on something, I don't know. But the fact is that we have had this. So why don't we diffuse that by simply saying, look, any collation result that comes in, we announce it. After all, this is not a private matter. It's a public event. So keeping everything to your chest to the last minute, making people anxious and all that, I don't think is necessary. Election processes should be as transparent as possible. It's the only way to cure the needless suspicions and tension that we create during elections. So for me, any proposal that is made, just as the NDC has made it, we have to subject their proposal to scrutiny. I'm not saying that everything they put here, or those that I'm picking to say I'm excited about it, doesn't mean it's all great. We need to still interrogate them with the view of refining them. Because as I said before, the whole notion of democratic processes is to keep refining them. So for me, this is an interesting contribution to refining our process. That's why I'm saying, whatever it is, we should give ear to this and see how we pick this up, just as past recommendations by the NPP led to the refinement of our electoral process. In the same way, I'm thinking that this could also contribute to further refinement. So, if in fact announcing publicly the collation center results, either at the center, the regional center, or when it arrives at the so-called strong room, is announced as we receive them, there's nothing wrong with that. I think that should be the way to go.
Great. Let me get your take on this also, Dr. Eric Odrosai, particularly on the public broadcast of, presidential vote collation process at the EC head office. Do you support that?
That would be, yes, it can happen, but a lot of things happen at the collation point. You know, what goes into collation? Collation means adding up and getting the figures together. And you know, it's not something that a lot of people would understand, most especially when we have representatives of the political parties there. I think we can choose to do a public broadcast, but it is going to be very expensive or weighty. People will not understand it, and duplicated of effort, especially when you have the reps there. We can have the reps there and rather make.
Well, I mean, it's only giving access to the media and saying you can publish it and it'll be published. Because I mean, I'm sure that a lot of media houses
but you know
will be willing
the challenge
to do that.
we've had is that the media space itself is polarized, because most of the media institutions and organizations are also formed by politicians, and they go there and some of them report for political parties. So it's also part of the problem. But I think that we can do it, except that it will be an unnecessary duplicity, especially when you have the reps of the political parties there. I would say that if it is about announcing the results, that is fine. But for the collation, a lot goes into collation. At times, it takes over more than 24 hours to be able to do the collation. And I will say that we're going to use the national space, reporting space, to do this for 24 hours. You know, so let us look at the pros and cons and how it deepens transparency in the entire electoral process.
Don't you think this proposal is being made as a result of the NDC's experience in the last election? Now, I mean, they talked about how they had few concerns. They wanted to see the chairperson of the Electoral Commission. She asked them to go give a message to their flag bearer. They left, and then the declaration was done. And so it's more like opening it up, people get to see all the concerns we have, and that would go a long way in ensuring that there's a trust in our electoral system. Prof.
But if you ask me, I would say that I would rather recommend that we should rather make the polling station collation transparent, because whatever will be declared or collated at the Electoral Commission head office comes from the polling station through the constituency to the regional collation centers. So if you are not able to police the ballot at the polling station level, by the time it gets to the Electoral Commission head office for collation, you cannot do anything about it. So in that case, then we should rather call for transparency at the constituency or the polling station level collation than at the national level. But it is also something that can be discussed. And this is a democracy. They can judge and then if the commission deems it fit, why not? We can pilot it to the 2024 election and see how it goes.
Let me get your take on this, Doc, throwing in the NDC's experience in the last election and whether this could be influencing this particular proposal.
For sure, if they're influenced by their own experience, there's nothing wrong with that. The NPP was influenced by their own experience prior to the 1992 elections, and that led them to make some proposals. So certainly, from experience, people learn, and they learn to make things better. So I think that's all right. There's nothing wrong with that. But you see, as Eric said, the whole notion here is how we build trust in our political, or in this case now, electoral processes. Trust. Trust is a very short commodity in our Ghanaian politics. But trust is a social capital, just as it is political capital to have a successful polity, that is to say, for the political community to function and function peacefully. You see, look, the ultimate interest of all of us as Ghanaians is to have peace and stability. And we have learned from our electoral politics that perhaps one of the serious threats to our peace and stability is the conduct of elections. And if that's the case, then it's incumbent upon us to find all the means we can to bring trust to the system. So these proposals and others that we have had previously, proposed by the NPP, I believe, are all designed to bring trust to the system. Let's face it, these two dominant parties, they don't trust each other. They talk and smile and make all kinds of funny jokes among themselves. The fact is that when it comes to the competition for power, they don't trust each other. And if we are not careful, they will drive us into a ditch as a nation. So I'm very particularly interested in any idea, any proposal that will bring trust. So if it's a system that we need to develop and make it bulletproof in terms of theft or whatever, that should be the way. So my point here is that, sure, the proposals by the NDC are simply proposals, but they are very interesting. They are food for thought. So let's think about them, and let's find a platform for it effectively. And again, to finish this point, I don't know how this proposal is going to end, whether the EC that is going to receive them and
well, the EC has received them and they said they will discuss them at Ipac, but they've asked the NDC to table them at Ipac. But let me just get your views on this finally, because they've also talked about the statement of poll and declaration of results form should be redesigned and simplified. I mean, the pink sheet, as we call it, they say it should be redesigned and simplified. In a minute on this, Prof, what's your take on this?
Well, I don't know how complicated that thing for pink sheet is, frankly. I don't have any latest sample with me. But if, in fact, it's too complex and it's confusing, then again, for the sake of transparency and trust, it's proper to simplify, to make it readable, to make it acceptable. There's nothing wrong with that. I think if that's the case, why not?
Let me get your take on this, Dr. Eric Odrosai. I'm sure you've seen the pink sheet. I've seen it. Looks a bit complicated. Well, I'm not a party agent, so I mean, I probably may not understand that much. But for the party agents, they're saying it should be redesigned and simplified. What's your take on this?
Oh, I think I may want to agree with them. They are the users, and they are the ones who are supposed to complete the forms for them. So if they think it is very complicated and complex, and it does not give them the opportunity to give out the information they have to give to the Electoral Commission, I think they should listen to them, because at times feedback from users or practitioners is always important for process improvement. So they should listen to them, and then if they can simplify it to help them get what they need by way of electoral data, why not?
But also with you finally, Dr. Ekwodrosa, there's been, in the past we're toyed with a suggestion that maybe we should end elections at 3 p.m. and all of that. The NDC is saying maintain the 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. You agree?
Oh, I do agree. Insofar as we will be able to collate the results in record time. One thing that we should avoid is allowing elections to go deep into the night. It does not augur well, and we know that we do not have electricity in all areas. And experience and history has taught us that it is after that period when they can't see things or there's darkness that people do all kinds of things. So I may want to agree with them that we should leave it at 5 p.m. So they have at least 1 hour or 1.5 hours to do the collation before darkness sets in. So I think I want to agree with them. We should end at 5 p.m. and that should be okay.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ekwodrosa, for joining us. He's a governance expert. Finally, Professor Bafo Agyeman-Duah, your take on that, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m.?
Super. I remember the time when elections were ending at 6 o'clock and the officers have to go to the field with lanterns and torchlights. The EC then, Afarijan, has to buy them torchlights and all that. We learned from that and say, hey, there's no point taking to 6 o'clock. We came to 5 o'clock. It's perfect. Let's keep it.
Thank you very, very much, Professor Bafo Agyeman-Duah, a former UN senior governance advisor, joining us this evening on our front on the Journey Channel. We've been analyzing the NDC's proposed electoral reforms, 30 of them. We've talked about 6 of them. The conversation would continue. They say they're engaged in consultations. And so the consultations would continue, would have the conversation. Hopefully when it gets to Ipac, they would think about it and see if it's accepted. That's all from us this evening on our front on the Joy News Channel. My name is Winston Amwa on behalf of the team. Thank you very much for staying with us. Don't forget to join me tomorrow on the Super Morning Show on Joy 99.7 FM. Up next is Joy News Prime. Keep watching the Joy News Channel. Have a lovely evening.